Hi everybody, it's Saturday, June 7th, 2008. Thanks for stopping by. Recently, Ehud Olmert, the Prime Minister of Israel, traveled to Washington to convince President Bush to disregard the National Intelligence Estimate report, which unequivocally states that Iran is not pursuing nuclear weapons, and instead rely on an intelligence report provided by Israel and use that as a pretext to attack Iran. Now, Ehud Olmert, is he worried about Iran being a threat to the United States? No. Ehud Olmert does not care about the United States. He cares only about Israel. He is worried about Iran being a threat to Israel, so he is telling President Bush to use an Israeli intelligence report as a pretext for war with Iran, when our own intelligence report clearly states that Iran is not a threat. Now, Olmert is involved in a corruption scandal in Israel right now, and he could be forced to resign, but it seems to me that he is doing a good job of representing the best interests of Israel, not the best interests of the United States. So if Israel wants to campaign around the world against Iran, or if Israel wants to attack Iran, that's their business, but they don't have any business railroading us into another war. Now, here's some facts about Israel. These are things that no one who knows anything about the subject will dispute. Most Israeli historians will not dispute these things. They might draw different moral conclusions, or they might equivocate it all away, but they don't dispute them. And certainly, people like Noam Chomsky, Ilan Pappy, Norman Finkelstein, these people will tell you, Edward Said, for instance, they'll tell you all these things too, so you might want to look up some writings or some lectures by these guys, and they'll tell you that Israel was created by pushing out the Palestinian population and replacing them with the Jewish population. Now, common sense tells you that you cannot create a Jewish homeland in an area that is already heavily populated with Palestinians or Arabs, whatever you want to call them, without participating in ethnic cleansing. This was a problem that the early Zionists had to struggle with, and they didn't necessarily embrace doing these things, but they were absolutely committed to their ideology, and they were absolutely committed to their political movement, and so they did things that they ordinarily would not do, and they justified them based on the fact that in their minds it was a necessity. Just like the Irgun and the Haganah, they did terrible things to the Palestinian population in order to induce them to flee. They participated in massacres, and looting and raping and burning villages, and they didn't necessarily want to do these things at first. I read the other day somewhere that the first time the Irgun was told to participate in these atrocities, they didn't want to do it. They weren't happy about doing these things, but they were convinced by their leadership that this was a necessity. They had to do these things. And they were committed to their ideology, so they did them. And the more they did them, the more they got used to the idea, and they came to embrace these actions as, a necessity and even morally acceptable. And again, you have to do these things. You have to explain these types of actions to yourself and justify them, and then you can even embrace them. You can say, oh, these people are terrible people, they're bad people, so it's a good thing to do these, to commit these acts. That's a lot better than thinking of yourself as a bad person because you did something that ordinarily you would consider to be bad. So these are facts. Israel was created through ethnic cleansing. Now, a lot of people will tell you that the Arabs fled of their own accord, that they were contacted by the Arab armies, and they told them, get out of the way and we'll destroy all the Jews and then you can come back. So that means that the Palestinian population were, in essence, collaborating with the Arab armies, and so they don't deserve any special consideration. But it really makes no difference. First of all, there's no proof that anything like this ever occurred, and second, even if it did occur, it doesn't really matter, because the UN and international law recognizes the right of a person to leave their country and then subsequently return to their country and return to their home. Even if they had some malicious intent in leaving, that does not mean that they forfeited their rights as human beings. They still have the right to their own property. Now, a lot of people will also tell you that there was violence, that the Arabs were always violent toward the Jews, and so this was the reason why they were driven out. Also, a false argument. There's no evidence that Arabs were any more anti-Semitic than anybody else. In fact, if you look at the historical record, I think you'll see that their record in comparison to the Europeans is pretty darn good. The Jews have been driven out of several countries. There's no evidence that they were actually driven out of Arab countries. There is evidence that they were, terrorized in some way, and that they left these Arab countries, either out of fear for their lives or because they were promised a better life in Israel. And to tell you the truth, I don't know what the whole story on that, but I do know that Zionists have been caught burning synagogues, and in these Arab countries are blowing them up in order to terrorize the population. Now, did Arabs do this as well? I don't know. Maybe they did. If they did, then that's wrong. But, again, that's not a justification for terrorizing Palestinians or driving Palestinians out. Okay, I mean, two wrongs don't make a right. If people were violent or if people were intolerant of Jews in other countries, that's a bad thing. But that is not a reason for Jews to be violent or intolerant. If you're the chosen people of God, then that doesn't mean you have moral dispensation. That means you're held to a higher standard. And that goes, the same with a higher, more civilized society, or what I guess in the West we would call a westernized society. Because we always believe ourselves to be more moral and more just, which is nonsense, of course, but we tend to believe that. So if you believe that, then that means that you're held to a higher moral standard. When other people torture, that doesn't mean you can torture. When other people engage in racism and violence, that doesn't mean you can engage in racism and violence, because then you're lowering yourself to their level, and then it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. Whoever the victor will be a savage. So if you consider other people to be a savage, don't become a savage to fight them. Fight them in a more civilized manner. And it is possible to do that. Okay, so, the fact that Israel was created in a ethnic cleansing is not disputed, but a lot of people will, like I said, they will come up with arguments to justify it, and these arguments are usually based on condemning the Arabs in some way. So like I said, condemn them all you want, but don't use that as an excuse to do the things that you accuse them of. That's all I'm saying. So anyway, thanks a lot for watching.